Okay, guys, good evening once again. I think we are good to start now. If you can hear me, kindly indicate via the chat box so we can start. Okay, thank you. So, good evening once again. Welcome to the TV discussion of the Learn Networking with Peer program by Direct Hackers. So, before we dive into today's session, I'm going to take some time to talk about the task that was assigned to us earlier today. So, we need to understand what we did yesterday, what we talked about very well before we can able to proceed to what we're going to do today so things don't get confusing. So the things we talked about yesterday, we talked about how to use commands like the ifconfig, the ipconfig, and other commands. So I will take some minutes to kindly go over them again. Then if you have any questions, drop them. If you don't have any questions, then we can go ahead and start today's discussion. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. If you can see my screen, kindly indicate. Okay, thank you. So the first thing we talked about yesterday is how to find out the IP address assigned to a particular interface. So to do that, we'll be using the ifconfig command type. So according to what we said, this command lets you know the IP address assigned to a particular interface. So to find out the IP address, just run ifconfig, then it will show you the IP address assigned to your interface. Then we notice that we have a lot of users on Windows. So if you are on Windows, the counterpart of ifconfig is ipconfig on Windows. So to check out your IP address on Linux, use ifconfig. If you're on Windows, use ipconfig. You get similar results. Then we also talk about the ping command. I, I said the ping command allows you to check the aliveness of a particular system. So if you are able to ping a particular machine, let's say you want to ping google.com, for example, if you can get responses, that means the server is up, the address is up, and we can talk to it. So ping command let us know the aliveness of the system. If you get responses, that means the system is up and running. If you don't get responses, it may be one of two things. It may be either the system is down or the server is configured to block ICMP traffic. ICMP traffic, yes. So the other thing we also talk about is Nmap. How to use Nmap to scan services. So earlier today, we sent our configuration files to our emails. What we needed to do was connect to the VPN using our configuration file. So to do that, I will demonstrate that quickly. So I have a configure my connection pack here as admin.ovpn. So what you need to do is to connect to the VPN. You need to run the command. You need to run the command open VPN, then the name of your VPN file. But if you are logged in as a non-root user, you need to add the sudo command to the syntax. So you have to use sudo open VPN, then your VPN file name. Once you do that, you'll be connected. And once you get this message that says initialization sequence completed, that means you are connected to the network. So to confirm you are connected, you can go ahead and ping the address I sent to the group, which is 10.80.1. So you can see that we are getting responses back from this IP address, which means the system is live and is responding to ICMP traffic. So to find out the ports running on this particular IP address, we need to do mmap, then give it the IP address, and it's going to return the ports and the services running on it. So let's just wait for this to finish, or let's just continue. And to use FTP, as I said earlier, you just need to do FTP, then you give it the IP address. It will prompt you for a username and the password, which has been provided to us, and you can use that to get the required files. Okay, I said to use FTP. What you need to do is use the FTP command, then the IP address, and the credentials you need to enter have been sent to the group, which is FTP user, and the password is FTP pass. So once you enter that, you're going to be connected via FTP to the system, and you can use that to get the file required. You can use that to get the token you submit for the challenge. Nita, which part do you want me to repeat, please? Okay, I'll wait for your response. I'll continue with this. So going back to our scan results, you can see that mmap returns the ports running to us. You can see it has port 21 open, port 22, and port 80. So to figure out the services running on this address, you can add some nmap switches like SC. Let's say you can add SV, and it's going to show you the version of the services running. So you can use that to determine the services running on that particular address or that particular system. So what we'll be focusing on majorly today is the command, one of the commands I mentioned yesterday, which is netstart. So as I said yesterday, netstart or SS shows you the state of your internet connection. So it shows you the active internet connection you have. Unable to run OpenVPN on a system. What is the problem? It is installed. Okay, if you can't run OpenVPN on your system, try to add the sudo command to it. So if you are running as a non-root user, the syntax should be sudo openvpn, then your file name, and that should connect you without any problems. Your scan did not get port 80. Well, try to run your scan again. It should get port 80. The port 80 is open on that particular server. Nita, if your configuration file is not working, kindly DM me after the webinar so we'll look at it together. As I was saying, we'll be focusing on the netstart and the SS command for today. So I said the netstart helps us to determine the active internet connection we have on a particular system. So it shows you the protocol. Let me try to decrease this so it makes it okay. So you can see that we have the protocol shown, you have the address, and you have the state, either it is listening, connected, or established. So this is what we'll be focusing on. We're focusing on the state of the connection and the address that is running on. Then similarly, you can also use the SS command to achieve almost the same results. It shows us something similar. You have the protocol, the address, the process starting it, and the local address and the ports. So one thing we are going to do is presently, what we'll be talking about today majorly is called service or port binding. So you want to look at two different scenarios. The first scenario is where you have a service which runs on all interfaces, and second scenario is where we have a particular service which runs on a specific interface. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to start. Sorry. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to start a Python server like I started yesterday on port 80, and we are going to do mmap, then my local IP address to check out the services running on my particular system. So if we look at this, I can see that I get port 80 back on this interface. So what I said was the first scenario is to look at when the service runs on all interfaces. So in this scenario, when I started the Python server, you can see that it's listening on 0.0.0.0, which is all interface. That means if I check all the interfaces I have on my system, let's say I do have config, and sorry, let me make this big. So I do have config, and the interfaces I have are WLAN 0, I have the tone 0 interface, I have LS 0 and ECH 0. That means since the service is running on all interfaces, if I do map on any of the interface, I'm going to get that particular service open. So if you check, if I run mmap on my WLAN 0 IP address, I get the port 80 open. If I run it on If I run it on 127.0.0.1, which is localhost, I get it open. If I run it on another interface, let's say, let's use the 20 interface, I'm assigned 10.8.06. So if I run the same command on 10.8.0.6, I'm going to see that the same port is open. So that means generally that particular service is running on all ports because it is binded to all interfaces as we specified. So the second scenario is when a particular service is binded to a particular interface. That means it's not going to run on all ports. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the Python server, then stop it. Let me stop this. Now, instead of running it on all interfaces this time, I'm going to run it on a particular interface. Let's say I want to run it on the localhost, for example, dot one, sorry, 127.0.0.1, then 80. Okay, so the syntax should be this, then I have the bind and I give it an address. So this time you can see that the server is running on 127.0.0.1, then port 80. So if I go ahead once again and try to scan the interface like we did earlier, so if I do mmap 127.0.0.1, I can see that I have port 80 open. Then next I'm going to try to scan other interface of my system. Like I will scan the WLAN 0 interface we scanned the other time. If you check this time, you can see that the address is not open on this particular interface. Same thing when we try to scan the 2.0 interface, you can see that the service is not also running on this interface. So now we have binded that particular service to run on a particular. Do you guys understand what I just explained, or should I go over it again? Okay, let me try to go over it again. So I said what we are going to be looking at today is service and port binding. We want to consider two scenarios. The first scenario is when a particular service is binded to all interfaces. The second scenario is when the service is binded to a specific interface. Let me go over that again. The first scenario is when the service is binded to all interfaces, and another scenario is when the service is binded to a specific interface. So I'm going to start a simple Python server which is going to bind to all interface to start with. So once I start the server, we can see that we have it's running on interface. So to confirm, you can do mmap. If we try to do mmap on the local host, you can see that we have the port open, the HTTP service running. Then if we try to do it on another interface, like WLAN 0 for instance, you can see that we have that port open too. That means that particular service is running on all interfaces available on my system, which is the first scenario whereby we have a service running on all interface. So the second scenario we'll be looking at is when the service is binded to a particular interface. So now instead of running this on an interface, I can decide to bind it to the local host. So if it's binded to the local host, if I do mmap the local host address again, I can see that the service is still running as usual. Then If it now this time if we try to run map and check the service on my W line 0 interface, you can see that the service is not up. That means that particular service is running on a particular interface. So to confirm that, we are going to be using the command we talked about. We are going to use netstart or ss to confirm. So going back to this interface, I'm going to start it again on all interfaces so we understand how to read the netstart output. So now the service is running and is binded to all interfaces. Now we can use the netstart command like we did the other time. Then checking the output, you notice something. You notice we have this local address running. We have 0.0.0.0 and it's binded to port 80, which means this particular service is running on all interfaces. In a network, 0.0.0.0 is referred to as all interfaces. It represents all the interfaces you have on a particular system. That means this service is running on all interfaces on this system. Then you can also use the SS command. You can pick anyone and see that that should give a similar result. Now, if you check the states here, you can see that it's listening on all interfaces. Also, using the SS command, you can see the state is listening on all interfaces also. So that way you can determine which particular interface a service is listening on. In this case, it's listening on all interfaces. So I'm going to look at the second scenario where it is binded to a particular interface. If you have questions, you can kindly drop them before we continue. And I'm getting a notification that the meeting will end in 40 minutes because of Zoom's policy. So if we get disconnected, kindly join again. Then we can continue. We still have about 10 minutes before then. So as I was saying, now we have the service binded to a particular interface. Then we can go over to netstart again. And now we should notice the difference. Similar to what we had the other time, we have the TCP, we have the state as listening. But now, if you check the local address, you can see that we have port 80 open, but this time is binded to a particular interface, binded to the local host. Similarly, you can use the SS command and you notice that you get the same thing. You have the port open listening, but it's binded to a particular interface. So netstart or DSS commands you can use to check which particular interface a service is running on. So you have to remember that the two scenarios we discussed is the service running on all interfaces, the service running on a specific interface. So now what I'm going to be doing is I will log into the server through SSH like we did earlier. So I will connect to the server, then SSH. Shouldn't take time. This is taking some time. Why? Okay. Should be connected without issues. Okay, I'm connected on one before, so I think I should be able to reach this. Uh, Sorry guys, I think I'm having issues here. I need to find the one connected before. Okay, there you go. I think we should be good now. Okay. Okay, we are good. Okay, now this time we are going to. You don't understand these magics. Okay, let me try to go over it again using this server I'm logged into. So hopefully you understand it this time. So as I said before, I said these two scenarios we are looking at in service and port binding is when a particular service is binded to a particular interface and when a particular service is binded to all interfaces. By now, we should understand what a service is. Was we talked about it yesterday, and I think the day before that, a service runs on a particular port. So you want to check if the service is running on all interfaces or the service is running on a particular interface. So on our system here, I don't know if we should have net start installed. Okay, we do. So we can run net start and use the switches. You can read about the switches. Before that, you can use man net start to read about the switches. You can read what the command does and how to use it. So the one I'll be using, okay, let me try to zoom in. Apologies if you can't see my, I think we should be good now. So we'll be using net start. Then I'll use the switches TULMP. T stands for TCP. That means it should show TCP connections. U means it should show UDP connections. The N means it should show the numeric values. L is to show the listening ports. To show listening, and P to show the port number. So if we do this, we can see that we have port 80 binded to all interface. So what we saw on my own machine was we have this port 80 binded to 0000. The 0.0.0 is the same thing as these three columns. What it means that you have all zeros and you are representing them with three columns. So this particular thing we see here means that we have the protocol listening on port 80 and is listening on all interfaces. So if we check the interface I have on this machine, I have the turn 0 interface, then I have the localhost loopback interface, which is localhost. So we can do mmap 127.0.1, or we can just do mmap localhost. It shows that I have port 21, port 22, and port 80 open because they are running on all interfaces. Then you can also do mmap and try, let's say you take the turn 0 interface and you get similar results. The reason is that these services are binded to all interfaces. So whichever interface you pick, the service is going to be open on it. Let's say the service is binded to a particular port, then it's binded to a particular interface, then it's going to be available on just that interface. I don't know if you guys understand me now or if it still sounds confusing. Okay, I think due to Zoom's policy, we may get disconnected anytime soon. Once you get disconnected, just try to join back. So for today, that's the two things we need to talk about. So what to take away is service and port binding, how to find out which particular interface a service is binded to using the net start command or the SS command. So if you have any questions, kindly drop them so I can answer them before we round up. Can I put you through correction for today's tax? Yeah, I wanted to do that, but some people have not attempted it till tomorrow. So let's just wait for them to attempt it by tomorrow's evening. Then we can go over the correction. To get the token for the assignment, use flag. It was transferred. If it was transferred to your local system, then just check the same directory. Just exit the FTP connection, then check the particular directory you are in. You should see the flag.txt file there. Do you have any other questions? The terminal I'm using is not the same with yours. Yes, I have made some modifications to my own terminal. I'm using my ZSH and a couple of plugins like I'm using ZSH auto suggestion and syntax highlighting, so it might be different from yours. Maybe one of these days we can just take some time out and discuss how my terminal looks and how to configure it and stuff like that. But that will be after the whole training. So guys, do we have more questions? What we're learning about today is services and port binding. Is it safe to say we all understand, or do we have questions? Okay, I should briefly explain what forming address is. Okay, let's do this. So let me find the pin which has this guy. Uh, sorry. Okay, let me use this to explain what we did the other time. Just already in use. Where? Let me kill you. Okay. Okay, thanks. So as I was saying, let me get back to sharing my screen. So as I was saying, I have the Python server started on all interface, and we can do mmap to check this and can see it is running. Then the question you asked about this forming address, let me try to zoom out a bit. So what this means is that you have the local address where the service is listening, then the state is listening, then the forming address, let's say this is a web server running, then someone connects to it, it will show the forming address here. I'll try to demonstrate that by, let me open another one. Then we can connect using telnet or netcat. I'll try to connect to this. Now, if we go back and check netstart, we should see a connected. Okay, I need to do netstart. Then I don't know if there's an E option where I can look for established connections. So what the foreign address means is when if a client is connected to your interface, it's going to show the address the person is connecting from, and it's going to show the ports they connect with. I don't know if you understand what I just said. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? So I think nobody has any questions. So I'll quickly do a recap, then we'll call it a day. So I said what we are looking at today is services of sports binding. And I said we have two scenarios. And I said we have two scenarios. The first being when the service is binded to a particular interface and when the service is running on all interfaces. That means let's take the HTTP service for example. Let's say you have a web server running on your system and is binded to all interfaces. That means if you run nmap on any particular interface you are going to get that service open because it's running on all interfaces. Then the other scenario is when the service is binded to a particular interface. So in that case, let's say the web server is binded to the local host. That means it's going to be running on the local host and it's not going to show up for other interfaces on. that particular system. And to determine which interface a particular service is binded to, I said we can use the net start command, or you can use the ss command using the switches TULMP. You can read about the SS command and the net start command and the different switches to understand what each of the switches are doing. So using this, you can check the protocol TCP. Now you can see that I have a service running on port 80. The state is listening and is binded to all interfaces. 0.0.0.0 is referred to as all interfaces. So we can take the second one, for example. I have a particular service running on port 5939, is listening and is running on just my local host. So if I scan, for, for instance, if I scan my local hosts and I specify this interface 5939, it's going to show up as open. But if I do the same thing and scan my WLAN 0 interface instead of my WLAN, we'll see that it will show up closed. That means that particular service is binded to that particular interface and it's not going to be available for other interfaces. So I think that should explain it better. If you have more questions, drop them here or you drop them to the group chat so we'll discuss further. So thank you guys for attending. That's the end for the TV session and we'll continue discussion on the group chat. Thank you and bye. You guys kindly wait. I think Moses wants to speak. Moses wants to speak, so you guys just wait, then listen to Moses. He has something to tell us. Moses, you can speak.
Hey guys, good evening everybody. I think first of all, yeah. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for coming and sharing the learning and teaching experience. Uh, we think we are enjoying ourselves and the limiting whether if you have a developer or and we have uh, um,
Sorry, Moses,
public
we
and
can't hear
trust.
you. Moses, we can't hear you clearly.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. That's better.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for joining in the sessions. I just wanted to let you know that if you have any problem with the platform on how the training is going on, you can kindly message Yanu or myself, Moses Joshua or Sam. That's the group admins, so we can work on better modalities. I think so far so good. Yanu has been doing a very wonderful job, and we hope we are all learning. I just hope to make use of this in our professional journey. So thank you very much, guys. And we have a hangout session on Saturday. That is after the networking track, where people will come and we hear from each other. Either yeah, we have the professional as well coming in, so we can kindly check the flyer. It will be sent to the group, and you can share to as many people as possible. So we have a very large community of enthusiasts sharing learning and also having fun. So after the learning, we'll have fun. Yeah. So thank you very much, and thank you so much, Yanu. Thumbs up, sir.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's all.
So, guys, that will be all for today. See you on the group chat. Bye.